Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. Chances are that you look at your watch dial for more than just reading the time. If the movement is the soul of a watch, then the dial is its face. The dial is at once a way to represent the complications of the watch, provide a means to tell the time, and, as often as not, a work of art. This is part 2 of our tour through the world of watch dials. Previously, I discussed and provided examples for the diver, the chronograph, the regulator, and pilot dials. Here are a few more. How does one define a dress watch? Or, more specifically, a dress watch dial? Traditionally, dress watches were an outgrowth of pocket watches. The dials on pocket watches, and at least initially on dress wristwatches, had Roman numerals. The dials were originally also a solid color, no far-out colors, and had few extra complications. Usually no date, at least not a numerical date, in a window. Another characteristic of the early dress watches is the use of a small second subdial, although as time went on, a central second dial was used. Modern dress watches are still relatively simple and straightforward, but they can have other complications. Dates, days of the week, moon phases are all fair game on this style. An interesting bit of detail is how the numerals, Roman or Arabic, are displayed. They can be displayed either vertically or radially. A dial with radial numbers have the number bottoms aligned to the center of the watch. This orientation looks classical, although maybe a little difficult to read. More often, this style is used with Roman numerals. Vertical numbers, most often used with Arabic numbers, have all the number bottoms oriented to the bottom of the watch, making these very easy to read, but perhaps not looking as fancy. There is one more typical characteristic of dress watch dials: a small second subdial. A running second subdial had its origins with the pocket watch, and is included on many dress wristwatches. It adds a bit of class, regardless of the position on the dial. The 6 o'clock position is the common location, but they can also appear at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or somewhere in between. And just to make life interesting, some dress watches have dials with no numbers, just some type of indices. Finally, some dress watches have nothing at all in the dial. Think of the H. Moser & C. Concept Blue, which is clearly a dress watch, but is something completely different. Another rather unique dial is the Bauhaus design. But what is Bauhaus? It's based on the German art school from 1919 to 1933, called the Bauhaus movement. Initially included only architecture and design, but later included crafts, arts, and consumer products. Bauhaus also influenced subsequent developments in graphic design, typography, interior design, industrial design, and even furniture. The Bauhaus design is characterized by a minimalistic, functional approach. It's the antithesis of form over function. It's probably easier to show than explain what a Bauhaus dial looks like. Basically, it's a simple design, although that does not mean it's plain. Actually, there are many examples of Bauhaus watches that are quite elegant. Max Bill was one of the proponents of Bauhaus, and he was commissioned to design some watches for young hands. You can see that the font of the young hands Max Bill is distinctive and representative of early Bauhaus pieces from Stoa. Here is my 1940s era Stoa Bauhaus piece. As I mentioned, there are some very fine examples of this style. Maybe another name for these is minimalist. I believe watches from Hobring II and H. Moser & C. can be considered minimalist. And extending that thought, Maybe the minimalist style is a modern version of Bauhaus. Looking at these pieces, you can easily see that they can hardly be called plain, but they do have a minimal dial. Although there is no universal definition of a field watch, the general consensus is that it's a rugged, generally legible watch where the time can be easily read at a glance. The history of the field watch goes back to World War I, and even before, where officers were using pocket watches to tell time, and even jury-rigging them with a strap and some soldered-on lugs to be strapped to their wrist. So what of the dial? Well, typically, the field watch has a large white hands on a black or dark dial, Arabic numbers for easy time telling, and the hands and numerals are loomed. Sometimes only a few numerals are present, with the remaining time markers being comprised of pips or some kind of indices. Usually, the dials are free of complications, although there may be a small date display. The early field watches were hand winders and offered hacking, meaning when the crown is pulled out, the second hand stops, allowing setting a precise time to a benchmark or another watch. Since this style of watch was initially used by the military, modern field watches still have a military-inspired aesthetic. This includes their ruggedness, reliability, and high readability. Modern field watches have improved loom, better movements, more often than not automatic ones, and are at home on leather straps, bracelets, and NATO cloth straps. Pilot watches are somewhat similar to those used in the field, but have unique dials and characters that set them apart. The main similarity of field watches and pilot watches is the simple, straightforward, highly readable dial. I hope you enjoyed this little tour through the world of watch dials. If you liked this video, please be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.